Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Healthcare Entrepreneur Academy YouTube channel. This is our second live. And on this episode, I want to talk a little bit about protecting your assets. So we are going to talk about the number one rule associated with asset protection and liability reduction, because as a business owner, especially in the healthcare space, if you are providing services or that have to do with helping patients, then you are at an increased risk when it comes to liability issues and potential lawsuits. And so that is what we're going to be talking about on this particular episode. And what the actual golden rule is that you need to be doing your business utilizing an LLC or some sort of legal entity. And the reason you want to do that is because legal entities help to protect your personal liability, and they are basically in existence just for that sole purpose. Because as a business owner, if you didn't have the protection of your corporate structure, you are setting yourself up for a lot of issues, right? So that really makes it not very enticing to be a business owner. So every state now has the varying levels of liability protection through incorporation. And that can be through an LLC or through, a C Corp or an S Corp, whatever your actual entity status is. They all provide varying levels of protection for you. And it is really important, no matter whether you're working in the healthcare space or not, that you are conducting business through your entity, because we work really hard, obviously, as entrepreneurs and as business owners. And the last thing that we want is to just have everything that we've worked so hard to build to just be ripped out from underneath us. And unfortunately, we live in a very litigious society. And we live in a society where people want things easy. They just want to hopefully win a lawsuit, win the lottery, get an awesome inheritance. Nobody wants to put in the work anymore. And I get it. Work isn't fun, but I put in the work, and you as an entrepreneur and a business owner are putting in the work. And so you should be able to reap the benefits of your work without having to worry about losing everything you've worked so hard for because of a lawsuit. People in America can sue literally for anything they want. And whether or not they have a legitimate reason, they're still going to run up a lot of legal expenses. And they tend to just hope for settlements. That's sort of the name of the game. Run up a bunch of legal expenses, create a bunch of stress and headaches, and hopefully the other side might just think that we have a decent case and doesn't want to pay the expense of the defense, because obviously that's really expensive, right? They got to pay for their own attorneys. They got to pay for travel, court expenses, missing work, and it starts to add up. So that's the name of the game. But the idea is to protect yourself from frivolous, any type of lawsuit, really. And one of the best ways you can do that, the golden rule, is to have your operations, conduct all of your operations through a legal entity. Now, there's a variety of legal entities. We already talked about LLCs and corporations. You should never be conducting business as a sole proprietor or as a general partnership, because those two have no added liability protection for you. And in the event that your business made an error or an omission, or maybe grandma slipped and fell if you have a physical location and she, broke her kneecap, or God forbid, there was some other sort of physical injury that was a result of your business's operations, you don't want to be held personally liable for that. And the best way to protect yourself is not only through insurance, which is a good option, but the best way is actually through making sure all of your operations are done through a business entity. Now, when it comes to setting up an entity, you need to consult an attorney and ideally your CPA, because various entity types have implications on your tax status, and various entity types have an impact on the amount of protection they provide. For example, in Florida, a single owner LLC has had the corporate veil pierced before, which means you don't want to have an LLC in Florida and only have one owner, because that has already been established in Florida that the case law, or the law here, shows that the courts believe that if you are a single owner LLC, you have enough control over the operations of a business that you should be held liable for those operations of the business. So you would never know that without consulting an attorney. And that's why I tell everybody to consult with an attorney and your CPA. You want to make sure that you have the right entity for not only the type of business you have, but for the state that you're in and for your particular tax situation. Now, there's a variety of strategies when it comes to protecting your assets in LLCs. Now, so not only do you want to, not LLCs in general, but entities, which can be an LLC. So not only do you want to operate out of a legal entity, corporate structure of some sort, you want to potentially have the various assets of your business held in separate legal entities. So anything that has a high value amount, any assets like intellectual property, maybe machinery, maybe automobiles, buildings, and various other types of property, you want to have that oftentimes held in their own individual LLC or other legal entities structure, because that will help separate the assets into different corporations. And you'll work with your CPA if you do this right to structure this appropriately. But you'll see in a lot of cases, that's the exact reason why a lot of real estate investors have each of their properties held in a separate legal entity. Because if say, for example, if the building burned down and somebody were to have been severely injured, they are obviously going to sue. Even if it wasn't the landlord's fault, they're probably going to try and sue the landlord, which is one of the problems with the litigious way in which we, in state and countries that we live in. But that is one of the benefits of having the LLC. If that particular landlord were getting sued for an event that happened in his particular property, only that property is at risk. Now, if he held 10 or 20 other properties under that same LLC, then all of a sudden, all those assets are held by the same company, and all of those assets are at risk. So when you start to talk about, various depths at which you could take this strategy, that is another layer of depth, and it adds an extra layer of protection. Now, there's obviously costs associated with having multiple companies. You can work with your CPA on that as well. Some of these can be considered pass-through entities, so they don't have to file their own tax returns. Their income just trickles up to the top holding corporation or the parent company. And that's one strategy to help not have to pay and file a million tax returns, but you do have to still file, the incorporation fees, the annual reports, and things like that. So in my opinion, you just consider that to be an insurance cost, just like you pay for malpractice insurance, just like you pay for business liability insurance and just general business insurance. You are going to consider this to be just an ongoing expense, like an insurance plan. And there's also, various other layers that you can add on to this. Like, for example, you can start to create this sort of structured effect with various levels of corporations. So the idea behind that is to make it incredibly difficult for opposing attorneys to figure out who owns what and what assets a particular business has. The more complex, the more convoluted, the more difficult it is for somebody to find out who owns a company, how many assets you particularly own, the better. You don't want to have too much of your public information out there, because these attorneys are going to do some due diligence on you. They're going to try and find out how much you're worth. And if you're worth any substantial amount of money, they are going to see you as a higher prize target. And you don't want to be a target. So if you do a little research on some of the richest people in the country, you'll find out really quickly that they don't actually own anything. Not because they don't have the, obviously, wealth to afford to own anything. They just have hundreds of businesses that own everything that they own, because that way it can't be taken away from them. It's all a very fine-tuned strategy that you sort of slowly layer on and add more levels of complication. There's also trust that you can use, and a variety of other things. But the main point of this particular episode is to just make sure that at the very least, you are following the golden rule, which is to do all business under and through a legal entity like a corporation or LLC. And just one more note on the various levels of complication that you can add to this, or complexity, to make it harder and harder for opposing attorneys to get the information they're looking for, and to make it as challenging as possible. You want to make it super expensive for them to try and come after you. You want to make them have to spend a ton of money to try and investigate who owns the corporation, and make a huge paper trail for them to have to figure out, because it's just going to decrease their motivation for wanting to come after you. So one of the ways to do that is to keep as much personal information as private as possible. I've heard of people and business owners setting up corporations in various other states, such as Wyoming, where the business owner's name never has to be published. Similar things exist in Nevada. So one strategy is to say, for example, you live in Florida, start a Florida LLC, have that, or legal entity, whatever it is, have that entity owned by another entity that is possibly formed in maybe Wyoming. And so when a possibly opposing attorney looks up your LLC, they'll see that it is owned by your, whatever, we'll call them LLCs, but say it's owned by the LLC in Wyoming. Now they go to see who the owner is. Oh, now they find out that they can't find out easily who the owner of that LLC is in Wyoming. And it just creates more and more hassle, which is what you want to do. There's benefits to having your corporate structures in a variety of other states, not just privacy, but some states like Nevada have very thick corporate veils that are hard to pierce. So Nevada, for example, has only had 4 cases since ever, actually, 4 cases where the corporate veil has been pierced, and it's all been for instances of fraud or criminal activity. So LLCs and legal entities don't protect you from criminal behavior or fraudulent behavior. So don't expect that, and you shouldn't be doing that anyways, obviously. But when it comes to, say, Delaware, I know a lot of you probably have heard of Delaware being a good state to possibly get incorporated in. And one of the main reasons there is because shareholders expect it, because Delaware has a lot of corporate laws that have been run through the court system, thousands and thousands of cases. So it's very predictable from an investor standpoint, when it comes to them being able to predict their level of risk. They know how the court systems in Delaware are, and they're most comfortable investing their capital in companies who have been established in Delaware. So that is one reason why you often see Delaware pop up, and because it has maximum shareholder protection. And if you own shares of a company, you are an owner of a company, right? You don't want to be held personally liable if you own 10 shares of IBM, right? And IBM gets sued for a big computer crash or a virus or something. That is why I think it's 60% of Fortune 500 companies are established in Delaware. For those C corporations who have lots of shareholders, the key number there, I believe, is around 100 or 100 plus shareholders. Delaware becomes very advantageous. So there's a lot that goes into this, and that's why I always tell everybody to consult with your CPA and attorney. But you need to have this stuff on your radar as you're starting new ventures, as your ventures get more and more successful. You don't want to have all of your assets piled up into a single corporation. You need to start spreading your assets out wisely in multiple corporations so that you're not such a big target. And if you have accumulated a large amount of personal wealth, everything should be separated out into legal entities held by trusts. Get some advice in that situation because, like I said, you guys work really hard. You spent years and years and years in school. You work incredibly hard to start a business, to grow the business. And unfortunately, in the society we live in today, a lot of people just don't want to do the work. They just want to find an easy ticket. And if they find a potential chance at making money through a lawsuit, in a lot of cases, they're going to take it. So you need to protect yourself and you need to protect your business. So I hope you guys enjoyed this episode and found it helpful. Make sure that you go talk to your CPA and your attorney, get their advice, and start incorporating some of these strategies and do some of your own research. There's a lot that goes into this. This is just the very tip of the iceberg when it comes to asset protection and liability reduction. So hope you enjoyed this episode. And if you find these helpful, definitely share them out on social media. Check out my podcast, the Healthcare Entrepreneur Academy podcast. It's available on pretty much every major podcasting app that's out there. But thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you guys on the next live stream. Talk to you later.